listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
And we are live from America and just outside the Matrix. It is time once again for the show that brings you the truth behind the headlines. I'm investigative journalist Lee Stranahan.
And I'm former CIA officer John Kiriakou.
And this is The Backstory. So it all comes down to this. We are 2 days away from John leaving The Backstory. This is his second. This is your penultimate show.
It is. It's my penultimate
right?
show. Yes. Yes.
Penultimate's one of those words, and I will confess, John, I am guilty. That a lot of people don't understand. When they hear the word penultimate, they think it's like the ultimate.
Ultimate.
You know, like.
Right.
It's
I like the word. I use it. It's a good word.
I like it. But what does it mean? You got it right.
It means next to last.
It means the second to last.
Yep.
Right. Next to last. It does not mean like super ultimate.
Right.
Which is what, again, I was baffled by that for many years myself. So there we go. But it is the penultimate episode of John Kiriakou co-hosting The Backstory. After this, he's moving on to Political Misfits.
Yep.
Heard each day, 12 to 2, right here on Radio Sputnik. We got a great show today, John. We had him on just the other day, but this Kazakhstan thing is a big deal.
It's a big deal. There's a lot going on, a lot of violence. Hey, did you happen to see the photograph in the Washington Post of the Almaty City Hall? Burnt to a crisp.
No. Yes, we'll talk about that, and that's why we have on the show today joining us. Once again, Mark Sloboda will be with us. Oops. I'm just saying oops because I'm hitting the wrong buttons, John. I'm very busy here.
Yeah,
but
you have a lot of
Sloboda,
electronic stuff going on.
I do, way too much. And we get Mark Sloboda on today. That's the point. Then, in the second hour, great friend of the show, Jason Goodman. I know Jason wants to bid you adieu.
I appreciate that.
Maybe we can get Ted Rall on tomorrow, Rod, and we can actually bid John adieu from a real French citizen. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because Ted is. Ted is. He's like you. He's a
poor Ted,
dual
too.
citizen.
Ted has been suffering with COVID for the last 7 days.
Oh.
Yeah, and this is the second time that he's had COVID. He had it at the very beginning of the pandemic and had a bad case. And he's been careful ever since, and he got a breakthrough case. And it's been more serious than a lot of the other Omicron cases have been.
Now, I don't want to predict anything. First off, let's hope Ted gets well.
Yeah.
That's bad news. But someone who's a regular caller on the show also has COVID, tested positive for it, and hopefully they will call. I talked to them about it, and they may call in about it today or tomorrow, so let's see.
I hope so.
But they're fine. They're not. It sounds like Ted's in not great shape.
Yeah, he's having a little bit of a tough time. I have 4 friends who have it now, and all of them have very mild cases. Very mild, thank God.
What's ironic is Ted is the most vaccinated human being who comes on this show.
Right? I think he's had 4 shots.
He may feel ripped off. Well, we got a lot to talk about, and we're taking your calls, but later, because we're getting to Mark pretty quickly here, because it's late in Moscow, where Mark Sloboda is, on The Backstory. So before we get to the situation in Kazakhstan, which we will, and there's a lot going on with it. Did you hear 3 police officers were beheaded?
Yes,
John?
Yes. So there have been like 12 policemen killed, 30 protesters killed, thousands injured. This is really serious. It's extraordinarily violent.
But people who are on the ground there feel like there's something organized going on.
Well,
they said
the BBC reported that some police officers are joining the protesters. So you may be right. We may be seeing the beginning of an overthrow here, or at least an attempted one.
There's something going on, and I got to point out that one of the things, there's a guy, Peter Leonard. He's not a partisan. A guy who's a writer for the New York Times. If he's a partisan, he's an anti-Russian partisan. Both of those guys, reports hearing from people on the ground, are saying this seemed very organized, that the protests started one way, and then very quickly the streets were filled with young men. There was looting, there was violence, and it seemed like gangs. And that's one of the reasons I mentioned it. We'll talk to Mark Slobod about this, but Kazakhstan, actually, you know this, I'm sure, better than I do. Kazakhstan, I didn't know much about it, been studying up on it.
Yeah.
That's part of Central Asia.
Yes.
Kazakhstan is right between China and Russia, with Mongolia separating the two.
Yep.
Right?
Yes.
You look at a map, that's what's going on.
Yes, and that's why it was so important to us during the Afghan war.
And to us, and what's interesting is Kazakhstan, the U.S. has been dealing with it, and so is Russia. And what they've got, though, is they've got a radical Islamic terrorism problem. Salafi groups. A number of them were banned over a decade ago, and I went through them. The People's Mujahideen of Uzbekistan, that kind of group.
Yeah. We grabbed a bunch of those guys in Afghanistan. I would disagree, though, Lee. They really don't have a Muslim extremist problem in that they've cracked down so hard on these guys. I would compare it actually to what the Kuwaitis did when the Kuwaitis first detected a problem in 1984. This is going to sound kind of crazy, but this is what they did, and it worked. And I'm not saying it's legal or it's moral, but it worked. They uncovered a Hezbollah cell in a Shia neighborhood, a Shia Muslim neighborhood in Kuwait City. And overnight, they grabbed everybody who might possibly could be maybe a member of Hezbollah. They arrested everybody, and then they bulldozed the entire neighborhood. It was hundreds of houses. They just bulldozed them and locked everybody up, and there was no Hezbollah anymore.
You know what? Maybe let's talk about this. Well, I'll save it. I wanted to talk about Joe Biden's speech this morning on January 6th, but I got to say, I'll just say one brief thing, then we'll talk more about it after we march the vote on, because there's a point I want to try to clarify the point that I'm making, because I'm thinking it through, and I'm open to being wrong on it, but I think I'm onto something. I really do. I want to explain what I mean by they've got a problem. The fact that they had to crack down indicates that they've got a problem.
But they didn't crack down on Muslims. I mean, in the last few days. There's nothing to indicate that this is religious in nature. I think what it was they've got a fascist dictator running their country who took over from another fascist dictator, and they were able to keep the lid on things for many years. Then the price of gas doubled, and they said enough is enough. That's what broke the back, and people took to the streets. Now, that's not what the reporting seems to indicate. The protests started organically, but then someone got involved, and I'll lay out what my theory is on that. But let me say one thing to tie it into Biden's speech this morning on January 6th. You know, if you want to see an insurrection, you're looking at one in Kazakhstan right now. This is what an insurrection looks like. What happened a year ago on Capitol Hill ain't this. Does that make sense? I'm just saying. Yeah. No, I agree with you on that. What we saw a year ago on Capitol Hill was a criminal action.
So we'll talk to Mark about some of this. What I'm saying is, you had a number of people from Kazakhstan who went to Syria to fight with the Islamic State. Enough where stories were done about it.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is, I think, and I'll run it by some of this theory by Mark, but it helps people to get it out now. I think the fact that 3 police officers were beheading, and by the way, the government thinks this is a they said that the government in Kazakhstan feels like there's something terror related.
Well, sure, but they didn't say Muslim terror related. There's no evidence that this is from Muslims. That it's been done by Muslims or a Muslim group. You're right about the fact that some Kazakhs went to fight in Syria.
But what about the beheadings? What about the beheadings? Is that normal?
What is normal in a Kazakh uprising? And nobody knows. I mean, there's no evidence that it was Muslims.
I don't agree. I think that the government, I'll start with the beheadings, which the Kazakh government said indicates to them that it's terror related. Furthermore,
yeah, but they never said that it was Muslim terror related. Just because they're beheaded doesn't mean that Muslims did it.
Well, it certainly implies that was the implication. But furthermore,
what
there's a group that's come out and made demands on behalf of the protesters. They say, I don't know what connection they have to the protesters, but this group has come out and made demands. One of their demands was that a number of what they called political prisoners, which are the people who we're talking about from those Muslim groups that were cracked down on. That's who so what I'm saying is this group has made demands that Islamic terrorists be released from jail. Furthermore, if you think about it, if you're an Islamic jihadist fighter who was sympathetic, let's say, enough to go fight in Syria, right? How do you view Russia? Think about it. Just on the basis of that. What's your opinion of Russia?
That's an easy one. You're going to be anti-Russian, murderously so. You're going to be allied with the Chechens. But the thing is, though, the Kazakhs that went to Syria to fight, you're talking about a couple of dozen people. And most of them were either killed or captured. The people who were returned from Syria to Kazakhstan were women and children.
Well, look, so first off, name another group that's known for beheadings in terror. Beheadings seems distinctly, George Galloway refers to the Muslim extremists that he's, Sunni Salafi terrorists as head choppers. That's his euphemism, right? But it was
the Saudi government does too. But they did during the Boer War. They beheaded people. The Indonesians beheaded people during their War of Independence.
Okay. But we got Mark Sloboda coming on. I'll ask him he knows more than I do about these demands that the prisoners be released. That's one of the big giveaways. If this group is asking that Muslim terrorists be released from prison, that would be a pretty clear indicator that these are people who are at least sympathetic with Muslim terrorists, right? I mean,
it's possible. I haven't seen that. The only things that I've seen are from Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and VOA, which of course are all CIA outlets. So I'm cautious here.
I am too, but I'm also seeing stuff from sources that seem to know what's going on the ground that aren't pro-Russian, and they seem to be saying that there's something very organized. The violence did not spring out of nowhere. It seems organized. We'll talk to Mark Sloboda about it right after this on The Backstory.
Want to talk? Get in touch with us at radio@sputniknews.com.
So, Sean, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, Bob, that's easy. I want to talk about the need to stop the development of self-driving cars.
Again, Sean, you're driving me nuts. I think the self-driving car thing's already out of the gate.
No. It's never too late. See, now the leading experts in the field, I mean, just pick one, whichever one, leading experts have repeatedly warned us about the dangers of artificial intelligence. Look, I'm telling you, man, we have to stop the robots by any means necessary.
I see what you did there.
Yep.
Tune into our show By Any Means Necessary daily from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Radio Sputnik. And don't forget to call in at 3:20 p.m. to our studio number 202-521-1320.
And if you miss us live, check us out on SputnikNews.com, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date on the latest political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us.
Feeling kind of blue, but maybe also kind of red, and kind of purple, and kind of alone? You've got a friend on Radio Sputnik. Tune into Political Misfits from 12 to 2 Eastern Time, Monday through Friday, for news, politics, and culture without the two-party bias. Catch us daily on 105.5 in Washington, D.C., or 102.9 or 104.7 in Kansas City. Or find us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, or wherever you get your news.
Are you bored? Are you lonely? Do you need a hug? Well, we can't give you that, but we can keep you up to date on Radio Sputnik.
And we are back, 105.5 FM, AM 1390. We are joined now, once again, straight out of Moscow, from geopolitical analyst, writer, all-around smart guy, and a nice guy, Mark Sloboda. Hey, Mark, how you doing? Nice to talk to you again.
Lee, John, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the Backstory.
Now, it's kind of a bummer you're on again, only because you're on because there's an awful situation going on that you know quite a bit about. And so you're in demand. Now, and I got to say, John, if you want to hear a great interview with Mark, I really liked the interview that they did on Fault Lines this morning, Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. You were on the show this morning. I thought that was a great interview too, Mark. So
excellent.
Thanks. Well done. What did you think of it? No one's here from that show. Go ahead. You can be honest.
Yeah, be honest.
What show?
About Fault Lines. You seem to enjoy the segment on Fault Lines this morning. It was a good, informative segment.
Well, isn't that the show you used to head up?
It is, yeah. My son's the co-host of it now. So, but go ahead, say something. I won't tell him.
I forget. I can only remember, the backstory. That's because that's obviously the best show on this book.
Well done, sir. Okay, now, Mark, you laid out a few things. For instance, that Kazakhstan is the 9th largest country in the world. It's about 3 times the size of Texas. I said where it is. I'm just keeping you from doing this boring geography lesson, but it's an important geography lesson to understand it's adjacent to both China and Russia. You also talked about this guy, Peter Leonard, who was tweeting things out, and it seems like this protest started organically, but quickly organized elements came in. Talk about that a little bit and explain who Peter Leonard is and why his comments are very interesting.
Yeah, okay, so Peter Leonard is a journalist and researcher at EurasiaNet, which is a Western media and think tank outlet that focuses on Central Asia and the Caucasus. And because of that, I think it's worth taking them with a grain of salt. But if you always only read, your own, shall we say, stalwarts' opinions, then you're missing out, right? If you can read past the Russian aggression and then the other line, they do some pretty good work, often on parts of the world that as a whole Westerners aren't that concerned with, right? Because let's face it, the U.S. doesn't have any critical national security interests in the Caucasus or Central Asia, other than global military hegemony. Right. That's about it. So Peter Leonard is an expert in the area in Central Asia. And he's their editor there, and he's talking to a lot of journalists, and he's retweeting Kazakh journalists on the ground. And what they all noted is that, it started in Western Kazakhstan as fuel price protests. The majority of cars in Kazakhstan are fueled by liquefied petroleum gas, LPG, which is cheap. And actually, because of domestic price controls, until a year ago, the price of this was lower than the production cost for Kazakh citizens to buy. It was loss making for the companies that were making it, but it was done as kind of a social benefit, shall we say. But it was killing the industry, and it was also causing problems because there was a big black market where people would buy up this domestically and then sell it for a much higher price out of the country, which was causing shortages, causing all kind of problems. A command economy, market economy, whatever. I'm ambivalent in many respects, but you try to mix the two of them and it doesn't work well. But a year ago they tried to have a slow shift to the market. Prices increased. And people, particularly in the sparsely populated West Kazakhstan, but where the oil and gas is produced, were extremely unhappy with this. So they started protests. And I mean, that's a legit thing to protest about. I actually don't agree with it. They had some of the lowest priced fuel in the world. And Kazakhstan is not a poor country, right? Its GDP on a per capita basis is equivalent to Russia. And a lot of that is because the oil and gas revenues, but also uranium. They're the world's largest producer exporter of uranium and other metals and so on.
And Bitcoin. They use that cheap energy to do Bitcoin mining, and they're second only to the Chinese in the production of Bitcoin.
And Bitcoin's price, you might have noticed, after all of this and the internet was shut down in Kazakhstan.
Crashing.
Dropped. It's crashing. Kazakhstan is part of the global economy. But it became very evident, as reported by Peter Leonard and a lot of Kazakh journalists on the ground, that these protests were very quickly hijacked by what was described as a large number of, quote, shady and violent individuals. And this happened all over. And these individuals were very well organized. They were very motivated and directed towards violent actions, the seizing of key government buildings and institutions, media outlets, the airport, hospitals. I mean, this was a professional element of the coup, right? I mean, this is not amorphous, leaderless protests. They were there, but they were essentially used as a cover. This was launched when those protests happened. They very quickly.
But Mark, I just want to emphasize one thing you said.
Depots. Who would have done that?
Wait 1 second. I just want to emphasize something you said. The protesters seem like they were in the country already. They didn't come in from other places, but then they were activated. That's what you're saying, right, Mark?
Yeah, and I want to separate between, shall we say, protesters, right? People who have a social complaint and go out on the streets and complain about it with placards and so on. And these people were insurrectionists. And when I use that word, I don't mean some people that went and took selfies in the Capitol building, however misguided. Right. What I mean is they armed themselves. They attacked, seized control, burned government buildings. They've beaten and killed police. Three police have been beheaded, indicating that there is probably at least an element of Islamist, jihadist, Wahhabist forces within this insurrection within a protest. There are, as of a few hours ago, there were 18 dead police and security officers and something like 750 wounded. So, I mean, this is pretty serious. This is not a joke. These people that are doing this, they armed themselves. They raided arms depots and firearms stores, started handing out weapons. This is not an organic movement about fuel price protests. And actually, just over a day ago, when the protests started, they had been underway for about a day. And the president of Kazakhstan, he said, you're demanding that I return price controls and that I get rid of the government. Okay, I do that. I return price controls and I sack my entire government. I don't like the way they're dealing with this. And he did that. And what was the result? An acceleration of the violence, right? It was, this obviously was just a screen for their real goals. And supposedly this is all leaderless and amorphous. And so various demands and goals have been set out on the mobile messaging apps like Telegram that are being used to organize this and so on. But they're all over the place. Now, Western media is focused on some of them that are calling for, this is a democratic revolution. We want a democratic country. We're peaceful protesters. When they start saying things like that and police are being shot in the street, government buildings are being burned down and people are being beheaded, I tend to be suspicious of that. At the same time, there's demands going out that Kazakhstan, which is a country with a 20% ethnic Russian minority and the majority of the rest is ethnic Kazakh, that they get rid of the Russian language, that only Kazakh is the official language, and that they cut all relations with Russia and withdraw from all relations with Russia. And that, when I see a demand like that coming from supposedly fuel price protests, then I start to get suspicious that there is a geopolitical angle and directive to all of this. There is a Kazakh oligarch by the name of Mukhtar Ablyazov. This guy used to be a part of the previous Kazakh president's Nazarbayev's inner circle. He was energy minister. Well, he was caught with his hands in the till. He was investigated for corruption. He accused the government of corruption back and fled the country with some $8 billion or more. And he settled in the UK and he bought huge amounts of really luxury, high-priced real estate in high-priced London. But even the British thought he was too corrupt and they brought fraud and embezzlement charges against him after a short time. Well, he ended up in Paris, which for some reason welcomed him with open arms, giving him political asylum, I guess from the UK as well. At the time, he was charged in the UK. He was wanted in his own country. He has been wanted for financial crimes in Russia, and at the time, even in Ukraine. But now, evidently, he has started for years a party in exile, right? That he calls the Democratic Choice for Kazakhstan. He is now cheerleading what is going on very publicly, what is going on in Kazakhstan. He was on Ukrainian TV. And he's on the Facebook, on Telegram, and he's calling for the overthrow of the government. And he says that he's in Paris, but his headquarters for all of this is in Ukraine. And actually, the numbers he's putting out for organizing, for directing a lot of what's going on in the ground in Kazakhstan, all those mobile numbers are Ukrainian mobile numbers. So quite obviously to me, I don't think that he is capable of doing all of this on his own, but he is at least involved in it. I would suspect that Ukrainian intelligence, which is obviously, harboring his headquarters, as he calls them, for what's going on is involved as well. But I would suspect that behind them lies even someone else. And the timing of this whole thing is very suspicious to me, because this is going on right when there's high tension negotiations about to happen between Russia and the U.S. and NATO over security arrangements. Russia is extremely upset about the de facto NATOization that is happening in Ukraine, the expansion of NATO ever closer to Russian borders, and is basically saying, you've crossed too many of our red lines. We need to have serious security talks, or we're going to have to take action into our own hands. That could include a military intervention in Ukraine. And this is presenting Russia with a two-front scenario of instability in what, both Kazakhstan still is, but, up until 2014, Ukraine was, a allied country of Russia as well. And I don't believe in those type of coincidences in geopolitical terms.
So with the Russians finally arriving in Kazakhstan with these peacekeeping forces and violence as bad as it is, I mean, presumably we're going to start seeing some conflict here. What happens now that the Russians are in Kazakhstan?
Yeah, the Russian, the CSTO contingent is the lowest level of CSTO operational force. This isn't the rapid reaction or a force or something like this. These are peacekeepers, and in Russian terms, they are airborne paratroopers, but they're two divisions that are regularly trained in peacekeeping operations. They're going to be lightly armed. They're not coming in, storming in with tanks. The total force is about 4,000. 3,000 of them are Russian, 500 are Belarus, and then there's a couple hundred Tajiks and some 70 Armenian forces. They are not going to be engaging in combat unless fired upon. Their goal there is not to engage with insurrectionist protesters, quell protests, or anything like that. They will be guarding government buildings and institutions. Now, if those buildings come under attack, then obviously they will take action. But other than that, what they're basically there for is to provide a degree of political stability and a morale boost for Kazakh's own military and security services, freeing them up from guard duty, to take, the security measures that are necessary on Kazakhstan's own streets. They are not intended to be there involved in combat. It is not, that could still certainly happen. But the numbers, while significant for this, I do not believe are of the size that at this point is state-threatening. And I do believe that specifically with this morale boost and political backing from Russia and the other members of the CSTO, that the Kazakh security forces and military forces can deal with this threat.
Mm-hmm. Now, John and I were talking about the potential Muslim terrorism, as you point out, Wahhabist, Salafi elements to it. There's a history of that in Kazakhstan. But one of the things I noted, too, from your report is that one of the demands was they were calling for prisoners to be released. And I just want to be clear. There's not a contradiction between saying there's a Muslim element to this and that there might be, for instance, a U.S. intelligence element to it. In fact, that would indicate more likely to me that there's a U.S. intelligence element to it if there were a Salafi terrorist that had been activated. People who we knew about would be upset and not fans of Russia for a variety of reasons, including having fought them in some cases in Syria, and also the makeup, all the reports that I read where it was, young men, which is, again, typical of the kind of thing that you end up with in this sort of thing. What do you know about the call for the demand of the prisoners? Were they asking for people who've been jailed in the crackdown John was talking about on Muslim extremism?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, of course there's a Muslim element because Kazakhstan is a Muslim majority country. But they have had, and they have a very secular government. And society, in religious terms is what you would describe as mild. But there has been infiltration of Wahhabist, Salafist elements. There was a number of terrorist attacks in 2011 that led to a harsh government crackdown because a number of people were killed. And a lot of this is linked to Saudi funded training, radicalization of the Wahhabist school. And there is the possibility, particularly with these reports of beheadings, that there is at least an element of them within these, the ranks of these insurrectionists. There has been a demand that all political prisoners be released. And of course, in Kazakhstan's case, that does mostly include a large number of Islamists or Salafi jihadists that are in Kazakh prisoners. But there have also been demands going around. Again, there are no official demands because supposedly this is all amorphous and spontaneous and unorganized. But other lists of demands going around have include that Kazakhstan legalize polygamy, which is just another indication of that sort of element being involved heavily within the violent contingent of these protests and insurrection.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Polygamy thing, it's that, or clearly it's a Mormon insurrection. That's the other possibility. I'm just basing it on what you're saying there, Mark.
I think it's definitely a fact that Mitt Romney might be leading this.
In all seriousness, and I don't mean to get too far afield, but this is a problem that the State Department has all the time in issuing visas to Muslim diplomats, right? I mean, every guy in the Saudi embassy has multiple wives, but we don't recognize polygamy, and it's not legal here. So we won't give spousal visas to more than one spouse. So everybody who has multiple wives, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, wherever, they have one wife coming over on a spousal visa, and everybody else comes over on a housekeeper visa.
I did not.
Yeah. No. And by the way, Mark, I heard we're going to let you go. We appreciate you coming on again. Fantastic report. But I understand you're not in Moscow. You're in Crimea currently, correct?
Yes.
And it's temperate.
My wife is from Crimea. I'm visiting the in-laws. The holiday duty.
Yes, you're in Crimea, another part of Russia. I just like saying that in case anyone from the State Department's listening. I like to piss them off. But is it temperate there? Because up here in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, outside right now it's -7 before wind chill, John.
Jeez,
it's a little warmer there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's right around the freezing point in Crimea, a little bit above today. So we haven't quite had that problem.
Freezing
Crimea is
sounds
a bit warmer than the rest.
That's 40 degrees hotter than it is here, John. If you think about it, freezing, we're a ways from freezing. That's all I'm saying. Mark Sloboda, fantastic report. When we come back, John, we'll talk about this a little bit more. We'll talk about the insurrection on January 6th. We'll play some clips of Biden and some emotional Congress people. All that coming up on The Backstory.
Every day we ask questions.
How is Facebook going to prevent suicides?
Well, do you see this as being a human rights violation?
Are the cows really stinking up the planet that much?
To move ideas forward.
A gravitational wave is a ripple in the fabric of space and time.
I don't think the launch of the satellite proves anything at all.
Where do good ideas come from? We connect with independent thinkers, hear their ideas, and create stimulating debates on real issues.
The Dow is in a correction. As I said, commodities across the globe are collapsing. Why is that the case? Because we are in a global recession.
That is set to change because Iran has approximately about 50 million barrels, which it had put in storage during the height of the sanctions regime, and that's ready to be released as soon as possible.
Where is the money?
The super rich individuals and the world's biggest companies are able to hide money in tax havens.
Is there a solution to the crisis?
No, because I don't think anything useful has come out of any of the policy reform discussions with respect to financial reform.
They give us answers we aren't always prepared for.
What are the chances that the report would make Israeli authorities to review their policies towards the Palestinians?
Oh, probably zero.
This recession will be even worse than it was in 2008.
But that would be the nasty way for it to happen, you know.
But because of Guantanamo, the U.S. is no longer taking so many prisoners, so instead of taking prisoners, they kill people.
A lot of people think that he's now unelectable and a bad leader.
Wow, there's just so much information to take in.
Pay attention, there'll be a test on this later.
Taking notes.
Welcome to the show.
Wow, this is crazy. We're definitely talking sci-fi over here. From 20 years ago, people would never have believed this. Crazy times we're living in.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around this story. This is a fantastic story.
Yes, it is a fantastic story, and it's a worldwide problem.
Welcome to the party.
And we are back on the backstory. Fantastic appearance from Mark Sloboda. And again, John, I want to make it clear what I'm saying is, I'd heard Mark on Fault Lines this morning. I'd forgotten the polygamy thing, and I don't know anything about Kazakhstan. I'll be honest, don't know anything about it.
Sure.
So I started looking into it, and the fact that it's a secular country is exactly the kind of thing, it seems to me, that if you were trying to activate young, Salafi-leaning, angry people, you would say, we need to overthrow this government. And the fact that they're calling for polygamy, for instance, what do you make of that, John?
I'm not sure what to make of it, to tell you the truth. Let me make a couple of points. There is a very, very small Salafi population in Kazakhstan. It's minuscule. It's minuscule compared to Uzbekistan. In Uzbekistan, it's a serious problem, and it's overtly terrorist. There's a problem in Tajikistan. We used to scoop up Tajiks all the time in Afghanistan. Same thing in Kyrgyzstan, although not as bad as Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. But it's just minuscule in Kazakhstan. I'm just not sure that we're seeing a coordinated movement. I think we're definitely seeing groups trying to influence the masses or the mobs, but I think it's too early to really understand if there's somebody organized behind this. If I were Kazakh, I think I would be tired of living under the yoke of an oppressive government that shuts off the internet every time somebody raises an objection. I'd be angry about the doubling of the price of gas. I'd be angry about a lot of things, and I might take to the streets. Not to say I'd behead anybody.
That's the U.S.-UK narrative, is that this is about democracy.
No, I don't even think it's about democracy. I think it's about economics.
That's what I'm saying what the narrative is. And what I'm saying is, Mark pointed out that the leader, and by the way, Sharif, I'll get to calls after the break. The fact that he immediately restored the price controls. If it's about economics, he solved that problem right away.
Yeah, but look at what happened in the Philippines in 1986 when it was supposed to be about democracy, right? People power demonstrations, everybody took to the street, it's about democracy, we want democratic elections. Okay, they make democratic elections, and more people came into the streets. Once that floodgate opens, you oftentimes can't close it.
No, but that's, again, if you read the people who've been reporting from the ground, who, again, don't have, if anything, an anti-Russian bias, they were saying it was obvious, it was organized, and that the organic protests were quickly taken over by people, organized groups of young people, young thugs, going through looting, for instance, and causing the violence.
Right.
And what I'm saying is your point that there's a small number of Salafi, whatever that means. It's a nation, it's a pretty sparsely populated nation.
Yeah.
It's only about 20 million people
in
an area 3 times the size of Texas.
Yeah.
But you know what? You don't need a huge, we're not talking about anything but a small number of people, really. It's not like there were millions of people taking the street here. What happened was this got violent because a relatively small group, of which I think clearly the polygamy thing, the call for political prisoners, the beheadings, all of that indicate, and Kazakhstan's history and relation to other countries, and the fact that they did have fighters go over to Syria and join ISIS and then repatriate back. I think you'd get, it's always hard to say. When you get a small number, let's say 100, I'll round it off to 100 people, who go to fight with ISIS, how many people are sympathetic with them? It's more than 100, right? I'm making it up. Is it 1,000? Maybe. Is it, in other words, only 10% maybe will go to someplace like Syria. The other 900 are like going to work at the kebab shop where they're working. I was watching a video this morning. I'm not just saying that's a factor. And they were trying to repatriate women and children who'd gone over to Syria to fight. You may have watched that video that I said. So as I'm trying to look at this situation, and it's pretty easy to find articles about the thing Mark was talking about, the Saudi money influence. And Saudi Arabia, to me, is a proxy of the UK and the US in a lot of ways. It's hard to say, to me, who's driving things. Do we do what Saudi Arabia wants, or Saudi Arabia do what we want? I think we're the more powerful country. I think we tend to drive the bus, and I think the UK is the silent driver. But anyway, that's why. Interesting segment with Mark and stuff. You've got to research this, because the Western media is failing utterly right now. You know what I'm saying? You're not getting. Here's what I know. You're going to get a bunch of crap from our media. So therefore, CNN, when they do an article, what's going on in Kazakhstan, 10 things you need to know, I just go, okay, these are 10 things I don't need to know. Now, let's talk about the wimpy insurrection. It's not even that, a year ago. Like Mark pointed out, that was a funny line. What's going on in Kazakhstan, that's a real insurrection. It's not people taking selfies, right?
Yeah.
They're killing people. Now, I'll point out one other thing that makes the idea that this is an insurrection a year ago lame. It was over in about, 3 or 4 hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
From the time they went into the Capitol to the time the people were gone was about 4 hours. Am I right about that?
Mm-hmm.
That you're not going to overthrow a country in 4 hours, right?
Right.
Period.
But there's a disconnect here, though. I agree with you that what we saw on Capitol Hill a year ago was not an insurrection. It was a riot. I don't think that's where the danger was. The danger wasn't from these wackadoos, throwing stones and spraying bear spray at the cops. The danger was at the Willard Hotel with this so-called war room. The danger was with elected officials who wouldn't recognize a democratic election.
So what you're saying is,
it was a coup attempt.
You're saying a coup attempt, like in 2016, when they spent the next 4 years lying. Russiagate was an insurrection. Do you agree with that?
No, I don't believe Russiagate was an insurrection.
Well,
I believe Russiagate was. I mean, I guess you could make an argument for it being a coup attempt, but no, I don't believe it was an insurrection.
How many?
And you know what? Russiagate was wrong, just like what the Trump people did was wrong. It's just wrong.
No. There's a big difference.
Yeah, the Trump people. What the Trump people did was more wrong, because they tried to overturn a Democratic election.
No, they didn't.
Sure, they did. And they're still doing it. Look at this crazy pillow guy. Look at what did Navarro say yesterday on Fox News? He came out and said this was a coup attempt. He's proud of it.
Well, I don't know what Navarro said. Here's what I'm saying. When the deep state, the CIA, the FBI, who are all involved in Russiagate, and the Democratic Party are all working together to delegitimize an election, it's exactly what Biden was saying.
But how is that any different from the Republicans working to delegitimize an election?
Well, okay, so here's the difference. The Republicans did not spend 4 years putting together a pack of lies, intentionally working with the FBI and the CIA, which what the Democratic Party did, right? And the Department of Justice.
Zero difference. Zero difference. Well, the Democrats tried to invalidate an election in 2016. The Republicans tried to invalidate an election in 2020. They were both wrong. And there are no degrees of wrong here. Listen, this is anti-constitutional. It's a major criminal action. They should all be prosecuted for it. None of them will be. But to say, well, this one wasn't as bad as that one. This coup wasn't as serious as that coup. This was more of an insurrection than that other insurrection. No, they're both wrong. And they were both attacks on democracy.
Well, first off, I'm not hearing anybody at all in the mainstream media. You pointed out CNN's doing it. Let's hear the clip from Biden, because we got a couple minutes. Let's hear the clip from Biden. This is the start of his speech. It doesn't really exactly address what we're talking about, but you get a sense of his tone from it. Saul?
The will of the people was under assault. The Constitution, our Constitution, faced the gravest of threats. Outnumbered in the face of a brutal attack, the Capitol Police, the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department, the National Guard, and other brave law enforcement officials saved the rule of law. Our democracy held. We, the people, endured. We, the people, prevailed.
So there's Joe Biden saying that there was a huge assault. He later in the speech referred to it as an armed insurrection. What were the arms? I guess I missed that part. What was the armed insurrection part?
Yeah, I don't know. Unless he's talking about if you pick up a flagpole or something and throw it at a cop, that's an arm. I don't know. I don't know what he was talking about with arms.
And the graver threat, I think clearly, and by the way, part of what caused Trump and a lot of people to lose faith in what was happening in the elections is that there were a lot of obvious anomalies. There were votes that did come in the middle of the night.
There have been 6 people arrested in the past year for voter fraud, and all 6 of them voted for Trump multiple times.
What that shows.
What you're talking about is we've heard a lot of allegations. We've not seen any proof. I mean, look what happened in Arizona with the millions of dollars wasted and nothing proven. And Trump judges saying that these people challenging the election have no proof, they have no standing. How many times did we say on this show that Rudy Giuliani would go to the courthouse steps and say the most outrageous things and then go into court and never mention them because there was no proof. There was no proof that anything happened.
Well, here's 100% proven clear. Joe Biden's son had a laptop. That laptop seemed to show evidence, and we had a person come out and state on the record, who was named in the emails, Tony Bobulinski, that Joe Biden was receiving kickbacks from his son's
corruption.
Which
has literally nothing to do with the election. You're right. Hunter Biden's a criminal. Maybe Joe Biden's a criminal. But you can't obfuscate this. You can't obfuscate the fact that it has nothing to do with the election. Nothing.
Well, no, it has. Sure, it does.
No, it doesn't. Hunter Biden had nothing to do with the election.
Well, let me point this out. The story goes beyond just Hunter Biden. There was also allegations
you brought
of
up
kickbacks. Right. his laptop showed what seems to be proof that's never been investigated of the candidate, Joe Biden, getting kickbacks from this corruption.
Yes.
But I would say that information about a candidate, let's go back to the Democrats put this country and Donald Trump through 4 years of nonstop lies, 4 years of it, based on the fact.
Oh, my God, Lee, that's rich, man. When 147 sitting members of Congress still have not acknowledged that Joe Biden is president of the United States. That's the lie right there.
Well,
they just can't admit that they lost. And frankly, in terms of the popular vote, he lost twice.
Well, first off, we don't go. We have a system called the Electoral College.
I know. I have a master's degree in legislative affairs. Thank you.
Well, then stop whining. And
I'm not whining. I'm just saying you throw these turds into the middle of the room and you think that they're not supposed to stink. You got to back this stuff up, Lee. You can't just repeat Mike the Pillow Guy and expect everybody to believe you.
As we got Jason Goodman coming on, I have never been a fan of Mike Liddell. What I'm saying is, when the deep state, when the intelligence community comes out and says the Hunter Biden laptop information is foreign Russian disinformation, and when they come out and do that, and that information is suppressed, that is not allowing the voters to actually get access to accurate information to decide which candidate they want to vote for.
You're mixing apples and oranges again. Hunter Biden was not running for president, just like Billy Carter was not running for president, and Donald Trump's niece wasn't running for president. You can criticize these family members all you want, but they have nothing to do with the election.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying there was proof on the laptop about Joe Biden's involvement. Tony Bobulinski came out and did a press conference, yet still high-tech censored that information. And that is an assault on democracy.
Well, then tell me, then what the heck were the Trump people at the Justice Department doing all this time with the information they had from the Hunter Biden laptop? Why didn't they prosecute Hunter Biden all those years? They knew exactly what Hunter Biden was up to, and they didn't do anything. Why is that?
Because they're part of the persistent state. Donald Trump.
You cannot tell me that Donald Trump's appointees are part of the persistent state. They weren't part of the persistent state.
I am telling you that.
But they weren't.
People like John Bolton.
Well, what about the Attorney General Barr? What about two attorneys general that Trump appointed? They're part of the deep state that was plotting against Trump?
Yes, I would say.
Oh, Lee. Come on, man.
Well, you've got people like Mike Pompeo, who ostensibly, if you look at him one way, he's a Trump supporter, and he's not critical of Trump. But I'm just looking at the time. We have to end here. My watch was zoomed in, so I couldn't see it was 58 or 59. So I was freaking out there for a second. But you've got people like Mike Pompeo that clearly show that somebody can be mixed loyalties, that they can be non-critical of Trump, but on the other hand, more loyal to the CIA, more loyal to what I would call the persistent state or the deep state. But we'll talk more about that, and we're taking your calls, 202-521-1320, after. I'm usually pretty damn good about the timing, John. You got to admit that, right?
Oh, yes.
Not being able to see the minute hand on my watch messed me up. But now I can take us into, watch this. Saul's going to start to bring on the music slowly. And I can say we'll be back right after this short break on Backstory.
listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
And we are back on the best damn radio show in the world. It's The Backstory. By the way, I want to thank Mark Sloboda once again from balmy Crimea, where it's freezing. That sounds very warm to me, John. As cold as and here's the thing about it being -9 or -7 or whatever the hell it is outside right now in South Dakota. That's without the wind chill.
Yeah.
With the wind chill, it's worse. 35 below.
We don't have too terribly cold weather here, but we're getting another 2 to 5 inches tonight.
Oh, I'll talk about that, but let's do the booms first. Coming up this hour, we got Jason Goodman on Backstory. Let me ask you something about the D.C. area weather, and particularly, we haven't talked about this yet, and then we'll get to calls. We got Tarif, Mark, and then Eric. You're all on deck. But you know what I want to talk about? Is this thing that happened on I-95.
Oh, yeah.
Between Dulles and Richmond, where the road was shut down.
Yeah.
For like 9 hours, and people were trapped there.
Yes. It was longer than 9. It was actually shut down for 24, and people were stuck on I-95 for as long as 27 hours. It got so bad. There was a bread truck that was stuck, and the truck driver opened up the bread truck to feed everybody who was stuck in the traffic jam, including Senator Tim Kaine, who was stuck for 27 hours.
But no, yeah, I knew it was over 24. What confused
the highway, but not just blocked the highway. They blocked the berms. They blocked everything, so you couldn't even go around them on the berm. And 95, it's a major artery. It goes from Bangor, Maine to Miami, Florida, and other than Route 1, there's just no way to get from the north to the south.
And if you were on it, you were just stuck. But it's kind of when I saw that, I was just wondering if you'd experienced any of that, because you're there theoretically. I know it's not real close, but it is a weird story. 202-521-1320. Tarif, thanks a lot for holding. What's on your mind?
Thank you, gentlemen, for taking my call. First, I'd like to say free drilling science and NIH need to be investigated. I want to bring up what I've been looking at Pepe Escobar tweets about what's going on in Kazakhstan. If you don't mind if I get the 3 other tweets. He came out with the first tweet dealing with, he said it looks like the West knew about what was going to take place in Kazakhstan by mid-December. So that's the first tweet he had dealing with the situation. Then he go on and say that the other tweet that U.S. think tank validates MI6 CIA plan in Kazakhstan. He was basically saying that the crisis could also be a factor in dissuading the Kremlin to back off its its scenarios dealing in Ukraine, where they're trying to use it to back the Kremlin off dealing with Ukraine. And the last one is dealing with, his last tweet is dealing with making fun of Erdogan, saying that it looks like some crazies from Turkey or Syria made their way to Kazakhstan. And Erdogan might have to sit down and talk to the Russian intelligence service to explain how that happened. So it's somewhat complicated, but people trying to put the pieces back together, trying to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, appreciate the call, Tarif. That's why I would say that's why I wanted to have Mark Sloboda on, even though he'd been on a couple of days ago, because, and it is relatively early. I've always said I don't like breaking news. It takes a while for things to shake out sometimes, but as things are starting to shake out, there's more to this story than meets the eye at first glance. I thought too that it was just, it's like the yellow vest thing. And it seems it started that way, but it seems like it's evolved into something else. John?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. with so many of these issues, we need to really wait to get the facts.
Yeah, but we do know, some of the things about the death numbers and what people are reporting on the ground. Like, that's why I say this New York Times reporter who's not a Russophile at all, he was saying it's pretty clear that there are nefarious characters on the ground who are pushing things up. So that's interesting.
And this is why Twitter is important too. In the early days of the Yemen war, there was a young guy, 18, 19 years old, and he was just sort of live tweeting the Saudi invasion of Yemen. There were no reporters on the ground in Yemen. It's too dangerous. And so that was the only way people were getting news from the country. I suspect we will see or are seeing the same kind of thing from Kazakhstan.
Well, that's what I did earlier in the day, actually. I went through Twitter looking for tweets. But the problem is the best way to do it is to look for tweets that are not in English, because then you're getting tweets from people who are there. Does that make sense? I'm not saying no one there speaks English. The guy who's the leader, he speaks Russian and Chinese, which is good if you're the leader of that country. Yeah. It's good to be multilingual, I guess.
Right.
But I'm not. So what I do is I try to figure out what the word for Kazakhstan is in Kazakh, right?
Right.
Then copy it and paste it in the Twitter search box. That's what you do.
Yeah.
That you don't have to speak the language. You just have to know how to read and copy and paste. And that helps. 202-521-1320. Mark, what is on your mind?
Hey, guys. Just a quick question. Is John leaving the show on a regular basis?
Yeah, I'm gonna leave and go to the 12 to 2 slot with Political Misfits. So Austin Pelly is going to replace me.
Okay. It's sad to hear you're going because I love your dynamic with Lee on this.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
I'll be able to hear you. I'm in the Northern Virginia area. I don't want to say I'm a John Kiriakou fanboy, but I read about you after I started listening to the station, and I was like, oh my God, what an interesting person. And
thanks. I get complaints from trolls so much that I'm a CIA plant, that I'm still in the CIA, that I'm naive, that I'm stupid. So thank you. This is refreshing.
I couldn't have been nicer to you if you were still in the CIA.
Well, I'm a John Kiriakou fanboy, so I am. I'll say it again. No, you know this, and I've said it to you privately, and I've said it publicly a number of times. I've really enjoyed working with you.
It's been a lot of fun.
To quote Mark Sloboda, it's an honor and privilege.
Same here.
To have been on with you. So John is leaving. He'll be on Political Misfits every day from noon to 2 with the great Michelle Whitty. So he's not going away exactly, but he's leaving this show, but he's agreed he'll come back on sometimes.
Absolutely.
On the phone, likely.
Absolutely. Very happy to do. And plus, Lee and I have a little idea to make some money together. So we've got that too. Which I'm excited about.
I'll mention that. Then I'll go to Eric.
When you go to do that kind of crossover, I think I'm speaking for myself, but I hope a lot of people too enjoy when there is that crossover. I think that's really neat.
Oh, it's fun. I'm on, well, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm on all of the other shows on Sputnik at least once a week. I do Wilmer Leon's show at least once a week, every couple of weeks on Fault Lines, every week or two on Political Misfits. Not so much on By Any Means Necessary, only when there's like a CIA story that's above the fold.
But it takes you through some of the things you would do to get off the grid. You see what I'm saying? Mark, how does that sound?
No, I think that's perfect because people like me need to know exactly what the CIA is doing to track those people. And if we can hedge against it, then certainly that information is going to be useful.
And also, John could turn over the list of customers to the CIA and collect a bounty. I'm just saying. Don't do that, John. But
InfoWars with that.
No.
Well, let me interrupt you, Lee. It's funny that you say that because I was on InfoWars about 3 weeks ago, and during a break, the interviewer asked me about these books I have coming out. I have 3 coming out on the same day. And I mentioned this one on disappearing and living off the grid. And he got very excited. And he said, that has right-wing extremism written all over it. You can sell 1 million copies of that book. And I laughed and I said, it's all about the marketing. I got to market it to the right-wing extremists.
No, I've told you. And because I've got my citizen journalism school courses coming out soon, including one I'm hopefully going to be doing with InfoWars. Last time I saw Alex, a couple of years ago, that was the last time I physically saw him. He was like, yeah, we got to do that course. He was, and he brought it up. So I want to get that going, but we could market it through. I think InfoWars would be a very good place to market that.
I think so too.
So that's one of the things John and I are talking about.
Yeah.
Is taking some of his books and turning them into online courses, maybe video courses. They could be audio too, John.
And let me add one more thing too. My publisher is Skyhorse Publishing in New York, and they're the ones that commissioned this 4-book series. So the first one came out early. It was the CIA Guide to the Iran Crisis. But then I did Disappearing and Living Off the Grid, Surveillance and Surveillance Detection, and Lying and Lie Detection. And what they told me was a few years back, they found this book called The CIA Guide to Lockpicking that was written in 1955. So it's in the public domain. And so they just put a new cover on it and they re-released it just for the heck of it. And much to their surprise, it hit number 10 on the New York Times bestsellers list. And they thought, what a great idea. Why don't we do a series of these books? And if we can promote them, they can actually, be major sellers. So they called me and asked me if I would write them. I said, and I was originally supposed to just write new introductions to these old CIA books from the 50s. We ended up rewriting all of the books. But I think there's an audience out there. There are people who want to know this stuff, even if it's just for fun.
The few people I've talked to privately about this idea, John, love the idea. Immediately loved it. And think it would be great as a course, in addition to the book he's got coming out, which don't forget, buy his book. But I think the course thing, we've talked about it. Let's talk this weekend about that.
Yeah, I look forward to that. We should come up with
I've got some exciting news on that. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, let's do that. I look forward to it.
I'll show you how some things work. It's very exciting.
Excellent.
Okay, now, Mark, you have one more point, then we'll go to Eric in Florida. Mark, you had one more point. Go ahead.
Yeah. So on the January 6th thing, and I don't want to redress or bring up the conflict you guys had in that last segment, but it was interesting. And so, John, I think you could admit, too, that a lot of the allegations that were brought up were dismissed based on standing.
Yes.
So any voter fraud, a lot of it wasn't really investigated. They were dismissed out of hand. And so voter fraud is one thing. So that's the aspect of it that relates to the election itself. And, Lee, I thought you brought up a really good point. There was a tacit admission of a real conspiracy that I think we should all be really afraid about in that Times article, in the Time article, where they basically declared that there was interaction between Silicon Valley and mainstream news outlets that helped to get Joe Biden elected, up to and including, and this wasn't, I don't know if this was explicit in that article, but the restriction of information about the Hunter Biden laptop reaching, the New York Post had its Twitter channel banned. So I think there's a couple aspects there.
Yeah, they did.
That are disturbing because we have elected officials that we elect into office, and if behind them there is some unelected guys, people that are wielding power and influence, democracy doesn't have control over that, and that should be what's really scary.
You can't name the last election the Democrats lost. They didn't complain it was stolen from them. You can't. I mean, it would have to be maybe H.W. Bush, maybe.
Well, a lot of Democrats I know make a case for 2004 in Ohio. Kerry versus Bush. And I'm not saying that it was stolen. I'm just saying that a lot of Democrats believe that the voting machines were rigged because the owner of the voting machines was a Republican and blah, 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 blah. And Ohio should have gone to Kerry.
So for decades, the Democrats have been whining that they had the election stolen from them. This is the Democrats' modus operandi. And in fact, when Obama won, I didn't hear a big hue and cry in the Republican side that Obama stole the election. That's really a thing that the Democrats do.
Well, because Obama kicked McCain's ass. That's why. That's why.
Well,
that election wasn't close.
That could be the answer, or it could be that Democrats don't like democracy, which is very clear. They only like using the word democracy.
Oh, Lee.
They don't really like democracy. They don't really
listen,
like it.
The Republicans over the last year have not been paragons of democracy. When they refuse to condemn a movement of a mob to disrupt the counting of the electoral votes. I mean, what's more anti-democratic than that?
A lot of things
or yesterday, I should say, Ted Cruz called January 6th a terrorist attack. That Ted Cruz said that. A terrorist attack on our democracy.
And so now you're a Ted Cruz fan? Is that what's going on?
I never said I was a Ted Cruz fan. I'm just saying that the Republicans are no fans of democracy if the Democrats are no fans of democracy, because there's no difference between them. How many times have I said that? That's why I'm not a Democrat or a Republican, because they're both wrong. They've both taken criminal action, and they're both anti-democratic.
But there's a big difference, particularly when it comes to the base. The Democratic base actually does hate freedom. They are pro-censorship. They are bootlickers for the deep state now. They proved that during the Trump administration. The Democratic base is 100 times worse than any criticism I have.
The Republican base, the average Trump. If we're gonna go down that road, look at the average Trump voter. Right? They're racist. They're anti-democratic.
The average one.
You're saying the average Democrat is a deep state bootlicker. So yeah, I mean, let's look at some of these Trump rallies. I mean, who are these people? They wearing F your feelings T-shirts, or F Hillary Clinton, or F Joe Biden. Let's go, Brandon. I mean, come on. What is that? It's classless. It's
nothing.
Classless
it's nothing
populism.
And the Democrats are racist against white people. And but apparently that's okay.
No, I didn't say it was okay. I didn't say it was okay. What I'm saying is they're both wrong. But you keep making it sound like you're trying to put words in my mouth that things that I just never said. I didn't say it was okay. I didn't say Antifa was, for example, should be burning down buildings in Portland or whatever. I didn't say any such thing.
Name a Democratic nationally elected official who criticized them for that.
Criticized who?
For instance, the attacking the federal courthouse up in Portland.
I'm perfectly happy to research it and come back to you. I don't know the answer to the question.
You get right, and I got to get to the calls, or Saul's going to go with you to political misfits. That's all I got to say. So 202-521-1320. Eric in Florida, what is on your mind?
How you doing, guys?
Hey.
It gives me no pleasure in doing this, but I am going to have to interrupt the Kiriakou Appreciation Society right now, and say that John knows that there are no legitimate elections in the United States, and so those Republicans, hypocrites as they are technically correct. about the last election, and you know, the intelligence community intervened in the election by censoring the laptop story, and that is a priceless gift of electoral support by the government for one candidate. So as far as I'm concerned, you know, the government tipped the scales and they got their man in. What do you think about that?
Yeah, and you know what? That's an important point, and that's something that ought to be investigated because it's absolutely plausible. That's why I'm telling you, I'm no fan of the Democrats, just like I'm no fan of the Republicans. They're all a bunch of criminals.
But it's not going to be investigated.
No, of course not. Of course not.
Because, and also because the media was in on it, and they were in on it, you know, from some pressure. But I want to make sure we get to Ingrid in D.C. Hey, Ingrid, what's on your mind?
Hi. When you were introducing Mark Sloboda, before you said who he was, I thought maybe you were going to bring on Scott Ritter because he was also on earlier in the week. And, you know, he might have something completely different to say tomorrow because a lot has happened the past 24 hours. And like you say, this is moving so quick. It's better to let it fall out. But yesterday when he was on with Wilmer, he had a very different take from Mark Sloboda's take about the whole situation. And he went into completely different aspects about Kazakhstan and the tribal nature and he didn't use this word, but how the current president was the leader of a certain tribal group. It was almost like a warlord situation. And now bringing in these kind of shadowy figures who maybe have Islamist sentiments or maybe just want to make it look like that's a factor, that might change his thing completely. But it would be interesting to bring other people on to talk about Kazakhstan and what's going on there.
Well, and we plan to. And actually, one of the things I want to say, I'll continue the John Kiriakou Love Fest, is that one of the reasons I spent a good part of the morning researching this Kazakhstan situation is similar to Ukraine in the sense that I didn't know anything about Ukraine. Then I started to look into it. And then I had a lot of guests on the show at the time, Fault Lines, to try to sharpen my knife. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. In other words, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. Mm-hmm. So if I say, it seems to me like there's an Islamist element, and John comes on and goes, I don't see, where's the proof? That gives me a chance to go, well, wait a second. Why am I saying that again? And I got to stop and think about it for a second. And then I got to go, well, okay, these prisoners, then this and that, and this and that. Now, again, that may not be compelling enough for John to go, okay, I see what you're saying. But often I found, John, people don't do that immediately, right? Mm-hmm. You may sleep on it and then come back. I'm not saying you're going to do this. And may come back on tomorrow and say, you know, I was thinking about what you said. I looked into it a little bit more. Yeah. There does seem to be an Islamist element. Or I could go, I was thinking about what you said. I looked into it a little bit more. I think I was wrong about that. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And this is the point of, first off, and John, I'm sure you have the same problem I have. Try to find someone who, I can't find someone who just agrees with me on everything. Yeah. Who just simply goes, oh yeah, Lee's right about everything.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
Do you meet a lot of people?
I wouldn't want somebody to agree with me on
who
everything.
are John Kiriakou clones? Right. Do you meet those people?
Yeah, that's not cool. I wouldn't want that because I need people to challenge me so that I can better hone my own opinions. You know, and opinions change as understanding of the facts change.
Right, and that's part of the situation that's going on in Kazakhstan right now, is that the situation is evolving. Once I heard the stuff Mark was saying this morning about the Islamist elements, I started to look into it. And then I saw the crackdown they'd done where they'd banned a bunch of groups. And when I looked at the groups, they were all Salafi groups. Mm-hmm. right? And so I go, okay, that's a factor, right?
Right.
Like, I don't know if it's a factor in what's going on now, but it's a factor. And it wasn't, and Mark pointed out, it's an Islamic nation. It's a Muslim minority,
right?
A majority nation.
Right.
There we go. And it is interesting. Yes, the timing is interesting, but I'm also listening to what that government's saying, and I'm also listening to what Russia's saying, and I'm looking at what the U.S. is saying, and what the British media is saying, for instance, and it is evolving, so we'll see what happens. When we come back, John, we'll take a short break. When we come back, Jason Goodman will be joining us. And I got to correct something, because I did a show with Jason last night, and I got some of the Kazakhstan stuff wrong. I'll give you, for instance, is Jason listening now, by the way, Saul? Is he on the line? Okay, so I don't have to say this twice. I said, Jason and I were talking about it, and he talked about how it seemed to blow up quickly. And I said, well, I thought that the prices rose like overnight. That's not the case. The prices have been rising for months. You follow me? So I was wrong about that. Now, does it change things? Not hugely. But when we come back, we'll talk more with Jason Goodman about it. And the idea that as a journalist, when you're dealing with an evolving situation, you've got to go where the facts take you. That's the only way to do it.
Yes.
Right?
Agreed.
It's the backstory.
Stuck in traffic? No problem. Stay informed. Stay tuned to Radio Sputnik on 105.5 FM or 1390 AM in the Washington, D.C. area. Need more? Follow us on Facebook or check us out on SputnikNews.com.
When the going gets tough, the powerful want propaganda. But we won't let them cancel the facts. Whether you're woke or drowsy, we know that you can handle the truth, and we're giving it to you every morning. Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan every Monday through Friday from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Your first stop for sanity in a world gone mad.
In a media landscape filled with so-called journalists acting as stenographers for their billionaire bosses, there is a desperate need for news, analysis, and perspectives that buck the status quo and get to the heart of how domestic and international events impact you and me, as well as showing how we can get involved in the struggle to change that status quo. Check out By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik, Monday through Friday from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, to hear the stories and voices that mainstream media refuses to tell you. And join us as we connect the political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us. That's By Any Means Necessary, Monday through Friday at 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on Radio Sputnik.
Hi, I'm political analyst Garland Nixon.
And I'm political scientist, author, and nationally syndicated columnist Dr. Wilmer Leon.
We're the co-hosts for The Critical Hour, airing Monday through Friday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time here on Radio Sputnik in Washington, D.C.
We close out your day with a thorough and hard-hitting analysis of the day's top stories, where we bring in brilliant scholars, authors, and investigative journalists from around the world.
And on Fridays, it's panel time, when we do a roundup of the week's most important issues.
Join us to keep up with the world's top stories.
Enjoy an in-depth analysis.
And have a little fun along the way. Listen to our show,
The Critical Hour, Monday through Fridays on Radio Sputnik.
And we are back, the final half hour of the penultimate show with John Kiriakou. Now that we've established what that word actually means. Yes. The second to last show, John Kiriakou, he's going 12 to 2 on Political Misfits with Michelle Witte right here on Radio Sputnik. Starting next Monday, Austin Pelley, will he be sitting in your seat probably?
Probably, yeah. Yeah, I would expect so.
It's a good seat for the cameras. Well, you know what?
Yeah. I liked the other one better, actually. Yeah, the other one's not working, but I normally sit directly across from where I'm sitting now, and I can see Saul that way, and then I can see what's on RT on the monitor over there, which is kind of nice. But you know.
Saul said, yeah, I just noticed where you were sitting, actually. Saul said the other camera's not working.
Right.
I'm going to tell Saul something, and he's going to get pissy with me about it. Watch. You know, the cameras can be picked up and moved, actually. if the camera's not working on one side, you can actually move the other camera over. I guess there's no way to say it without sounding like a jerk.
Right.
But, yeah, Saul, right.
Saul's changing the subject.
Is changing the subject. But I don't know how to put it. They could move it around.
Yeah.
The guy who knows video, a guy who I've known for 30-plus years, Jason Goodman from Crowdsource the Truth. Hey, Jason, how you doing?
I am well, Lee. How are you? Delighted to be here on John's penultimate show. I'm honored.
The
Hello, John, as
penultimate.
well.
Good to talk to you again.
Did you know what penultimate means, Jason? Did you be honest?
Yeah, the one before the last one. Yeah.
Okay, so did you always know that, or did you just figure it out in the past few years? Be honest.
I definitely didn't know it when I was like a baby, but at some point in my adult life, high school or college, I came to know that. Yeah. I have used it incorrectly and was corrected.
Apparently, I'm the only stupid person, John.
No.
I didn't know what it meant. Now, Jason, I want to talk about the Biden speech. We got another clip. We'll play that in a second too. But
yeah.
Since it's the penultimate show with John Kiriakou, I thought we should bicker a little bit more. Why not? Now, I'm going to make a general statement. I'm going to repeat something I said last thing. The Democrat base is worse than the Republican base. And John actually showed part of the reason. Do you know what the Republican base doesn't do, John? They don't accuse everyone of being racist. You know what? For you to say that the average Republican voter is racist is a crock of crap.
No, I believe it. I believe it. Another thing, too, that the Republicans do is anybody who doesn't agree with them is a rhino. And that's just BS.
But wait a second. You just accused most Republicans are racist, you're saying.
That's a bit extreme, I think, John.
Maybe it's a little extreme, but that's what I've come to believe over the last 4 or 5 years.
You're watching the news too much.
Racist against who? Racist against who? Black people, for instance, who have is there name a country on earth that's a better country to be black in? Name a country on earth. And
I could name 24 of them.
Well, name one.
Really? Greece.
Really?
Yeah.
So you think
isn't the economy terrible in Greece? Like,
no, the economy's quite good. I mean, they went through a period where they had a rough economy, but that has nothing to do with being black there.
No, why
less opportunity?
Why are you saying it's better?
Because we don't have these racism issues in Greece.
Well, I don't think we had racism issues tremendously in the United States until people started saying, hey, we're really racist, and starting fights and riots and burning police cars. I felt like the United States was slowly but surely moving towards more racial equality. We had a half-black president. We've got black CEOs, black movie stars. Black people can get any job they want, start a business. I don't know. You know what? In Hollywood, when I was there in the 2010s, I lost jobs to people where I felt that person's not as qualified as me, but they are black, and I wonder if that played a role in them getting the job.
Maybe. I've got a friend who works in Hollywood now, and he told me just a crazy story the other day. He said that they were shooting a scene that took place in a high school, and the lead character says hi to a janitor. The janitor is a black actor. And it's the janitor's only line. Hi, how are you? Good to see you, whatever the line was. And the director said, wait a minute. We can't have the janitor be black because that's objectifying black people and saying that they're only suitable to be janitors. So they fired him. And they brought in a white guy.
Oh, my God.
To be the janitor.
That guy lost his job. Wow,
yeah.
Great. Oh, what a dumb situation. But let's talk about this speech with Joe Biden, because I don't know if I've ever heard a more objectionable, hypocritical
it was pretty crazy
thing.
It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear you say that, John. I thought you really like Joe Biden.
I've never been a Biden fan. I didn't vote for Joe Biden. And, you know, sometimes he has good days, sometimes he has bad days. But what we're seeing here, what we saw today with this speech is the Democrats made a decision early on that they were going to use January 6th to drum up votes and support, right? They were going to, they have a very clear script that this was an insurrection, and they're going to try to paint it as a, well, you heard it in the speech, a violent armed insurrection.
Domestic terrorism.
Domestic terrorism. And then, like I said a few minutes ago, you had this really perfectly timed, stupid statement from Ted Cruz that it was an act of terrorism. And so he played right into the Democrats' strategy. The problem is that some days Joe Biden is good at reading the cue cards, and some days he's bad. And to me, you know, he was just bad today.
Well, yeah, and we'll get to, I want to get to the congressperson's quote. But since we're speaking of race, and by the way, Jen is on the line, and we'll take the call. She wants to talk about the race thing. But I'll make one other point. There was a racist dog whistle in Joe Biden's January 6th speech this morning. Yeah, and that's where he brought up the Confederate flag. Remember that, John?
Mm-hmm.
And he said, even in the Civil War, they didn't. This was not like the attack of the Confederates. There was one. First off, Jason, where were you on January 6th? A year ago.
I was
where
there.
were
I
you
was in
physically?
Washington, D.C., and I was, you know, what's the name of that place where Trump was giving the speech? Not the mall, but he gave the speech, and then I left and walked over to the Capitol, and I was
the Ellipse.
standing out. The Ellipse, right. Then I walked to the Capitol, and I was standing outside there, and I was in an area on the sidewalk behind a wall, so it's sort of like, you know, there's like a short stone wall that kind of abuts the lawn.
Yes.
And I was standing on one side of that wall. And, you know, I know that one of the things we wanted to discuss was what I saw firsthand on the ground there. And this is very important because I've posted a video. It's about 5 hours of continuous video of just walking around, talking to people, surveying the crowd. I actually walked all over the place. People who watch Crowdsource the Truth know that I sometimes go on 2-3 hour walks and cover quite a distance. But, you know, what I saw was obvious on the day. It's not like somebody said this and influenced my opinion. When I saw people who were in their 20s and 30s wearing skinny jeans and black clothing, just with a Trump hat on, and with a medical mask or a bandana, those were not Trump supporters, because Trump supporters were not wearing COVID masks, particularly not the young ones. And the interesting thing is, as I look back on the video, you know, there was I remembered this, but I didn't remember the details of what the perpetrators were wearing. When I was standing behind that wall looking at the Capitol being attacked, these two guys who appeared to be in their 20s or maybe younger, they come up and they start pulling the fence posts out of the ground. And I said something to the effect of, hey, knock it off, you two dummies. And they were like, oh, why? And I said, because you're going to attract the cops over here. You're destroying property, and we're not here to destroy things. It was clear to me that there were people in that crowd. And I'm not saying that everybody who entered the building was an Antifa person in disguise. What I'm saying is, like this guy, Ray Epps, who magically, why is he not called in to testify in front of the committee? At this point, everybody knows the guy's name.
That's the answer right there. The fact that Ray Epps was not called in to testify, the fact that Ray Epps was not arrested for what he did, to me, proves that he was an FBI plant.
Correct.
It proves it.
And that means that this incident is not what they're telling us it was. And there are people who are sitting in jail for almost a year at this point. They haven't been convicted of crimes. John, you know how terrible. I have no idea how bad it is to be in jail. I can imagine.
Miserable.
But these guys haven't even been convicted.
Yeah.
They're pretrial detainees.
Yes.
You can drive a SUV through a Christmas parade. You can shoot up your school. Maybe the Christmas parade guy didn't get out on bail. But there are people who, there's some kid who shot up the high school.
Yeah.
Or shot 2 or 3 people, and they let him out on bail.
Released. And, you know, it could be even worse for these guys because there's no law or rule that says once they're convicted and sentenced that they even get credit for the time that they've been in prison. Usually you do, but not always. It depends on the judge.
That's a concession from the prosecutor or the judge, right?
Yes, this could be far worse. Or
Jason,
may turn out to be far worse.
And Jen, hold on, we will get to you, Jen, because we got a surprise announcement with Jen. By the way, John, I hinted at it before.
Yes.
But
yes,
so you can figure it out.
Yes.
But Jason, walking around, did you see a lot of Confederate flags? Was it like a Civil War reenactment or a Dukes of Hazzard convention?
Not at all. I think there was one more on there with a Confederate flag, and that could have easily been an Antifa guy with that flag. I have seen, not just on January 6th, I see it around in New York City. I see it outside Gracie Mansion, outside City Hall. People who pretend to be supporting whatever, anti-mask mandate, Donald Trump, whatever it is, so they can go to the rally and then they, turn over a COVID testing tent. And then the next day, the news report is, oh, New York City anti-maskers, vandalize a COVID testing facility. And it's a couple of idiots who knew that this protest was happening and want to make the people who truly support anti-mask mandate, you want to make them look bad. The same thing happened on January 6th. Why hasn't John Sullivan called?
I just want to finish that. The reason Biden brought it up in the speech today is he's trying to tie this in. The Democrats, and Biden's leading the way, trying to make it really easy for Democrats or people they think are Democrats to vote. They don't care. They could care less about democracy. They're trying to make it easy for anyone they think will vote Democratic, whether they've got ID or not or anything else. The reason they're calling it voting rights legislation is to trying to tie it into America's civil rights legacy. And him bringing up the Confederate flag, and we didn't see, he's trying. Here's one of the things I thought was interesting, and I don't think this is controversial at all, John. I swear to God. I don't think Joe Biden was trying to convince anyone. In other words, he wasn't saying anything to the people who disagree with him. He was playing to his base of people who uncritically agree with anything he says. That's it. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and part of that was they're aware, we've had guests on the show talk about it, that without the black vote, particularly in the midterms, but even in 2024, the Democrats will lose. And what they have to do is they can't defend themselves on policy. It's not like they've made life better for black Americans in the past. The cities that they run. Now, for instance, oh, by the way, just mentioning it has nothing to do with politics, but we should mention it. There was a horrible fire in Philadelphia.
Yeah, dreadful.
Awful. You know what I'm talking about, John.
Oh, yeah, just a terrible tragedy.
This row house caught fire. 13 people killed, like 8 of them children.
Yeah, there were 26 people living in that house.
What?
It was a duplex.
Yep.
With 26 people living in it.
Wow.
And no smoke detectors.
Yep.
Whoa.
And it was it's a horrible situation. And I just want to mention, it's not political, but it's a big enough story.
Yeah.
We should at least mention it.
Yeah.
202-521, I want to get to Jen. 202-521-1320. I want to bring on someone who has COVID, John. Ready?
Oh,
it's Jen.
Jen, I'm so sorry to hear that. I hope that it's a very, very mild case.
Hi. How you guys doing? Hi, John.
You feeling okay?
Well,
hi, Jen.
I am now. Hi, how you doing? I'm like day 4 right now, but I'll tell you that the second day, you've seen The Revenant, right? With Leonardo DiCaprio.
Oh yeah.
You know the scene where he's basically dying, and the medicine woman comes and wraps him in that cocoon.
Yes.
Okay, so that second night will forever be known as The Revenant.
Oh my God. Wow. Oh my God. I'm so sorry to hear that.
I have a question, Jen. I have a question. Have you had the vaccine?
No way.
You haven't had it, and you still got COVID. Okay.
No.
Because at this point, the only people I know personally who have gotten it have had the vaccine.
Yeah. In fact, I mentioned in the last hour, 4 of my friends right now have it. They're all vaccinated, but they have very, very light to no symptoms. They're just sitting at home watching TV until they can test negative.
But I had basically the worst of my symptom, like it was a bronchitic cough, which was like, sort of like it's different than postnasal drip, and then just body aches, mostly low back and legs, but also that revenant thing I'm talking about. I could not get warm. I had piled blankets upon blankets. I was like in a cocoon, and then he put a heating pad on my chest, and I had Riger. I was shaking. I was so cold. I was so cold.
Wow.
It was. I thought I was going to. I literally thought I was going to. I felt like I was going to die. But I still not would have said on the news, "I'll get the vaccine." I wouldn't have done that.
And you haven't been hospitalized, right?
No, that's the last place I would have gone.
Yeah. And was your doctor able to prescribe anything for you? Was there any way that you could get relief?
No, I didn't call a doctor because, I knew.
You knew what it was.
That's probably what it was. I did end up testing myself with the antigen test from Walgreens.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And to verify it. But I had a sense that it was either the flu, because I've had the flu before, and it felt a lot like that, which, or I thought, okay, maybe this is COVID. And I just basically took Zicam, which is like a zinc sort of formulation, vitamin D, Advil, water, that kind of stuff, and just wrote it out. I mean, I knew I was.
Well, you sound fine.
And
you sound better.
And when Jen talks about not wanting to go to the hospital, I should point out she's from 3 generations of women, her mom and her grandma, who, by the way, I'm talking about doing Jen and I are going to be doing our podcast pretty soon. But I should do the podcast with her 98-year-old grandma because she's a firecracker. Right, Jen? Am I right?
Yeah, my grandma doesn't make any bones about her opinion. She's pretty tough. Worked in the fire, and she's
Jenna, but so when she says if she gets sick, the hospital's the last place she wants to be.
Yeah,
it's not she's a Christian Scientist. It's she's aware of how hospitals are.
Yes.
Right, Jen?
Yes.
But this is important. This is an important point that Jen is raising. I mean, I grew up in a family of doctors where it has always been this really strange thing to me, people who just don't go to the doctor or are afraid of the doctor. However, I had an epiphany the other day because I said to myself, boy, what happens if I get injured and need to go to the hospital? The first thing they're going to do is vaccinate me. And then I started thinking about how bad would I need to feel to go see a doctor? And I realized that I don't want to go to the doctor. And the net effect of all of this, in addition to everything else that it's doing, is that I really think it's had a significant and unprecedented negative impact on the public perception of healthcare. And that's going to lead to problems down the road.
That's a good point.
I think it's going to lead to a change, actually, to be honest. I think it's going to lead to a big shift in the way medicine is practiced. And maybe not this year, but in the near term,
How do you mean?
And also, well, I want to make sure we get, just Jen wasn't calling to talk about this. I knew she was willing to talk about it on the air. But in all fairness, full disclosure, Jen's mom is also a pistol. I got to say, I've talked to her mom. And I've just seen video of her grandma. But if you think Jen's feisty, it's in the DNA, right, Jen? I mean, I'm not making this up about your mom and your grandma, right?
Right.
Yeah, they're great. Now, Jen, you were calling to talk about race. What say you?
Right. Yeah. So there was two things. One, I wanted to, the racing, something I just thought was sort of interesting because you brought up race in America and that sort of thing. I cannot remember the name of this documentary, but they said something in there it was about Germany and, the Holocaust. And the Germans that they were interviewing were around when the Holocaust had occurred, and they had a concentration camp. It might have been Poland, actually, within their neighborhood, and they were just talking about their collective guilt surrounding that. And And they were talking to other Germans, and they were expressing guilt over all this and stuff. And it really struck me, you know, in America, if you talk to somebody about slavery, what's the first thing they say? I never owned a slave. My parents didn't own a slave. And, you know, that to me is an issue, and it's probably why there's a big divide. Because in Germany, you've got these people saying, yeah, we feel really bad about that, right? So think about the difference when you're a black person, you hear, I never owned a slave, versus somebody saying, yeah, that was really bad. We feel really bad about that. When you hear that,
good point.
I never owned a slave, you're hearing two different things. And so I just kind of wanted to bring that up because when John said...
Well, I want to just say one thing if I can, Jen, because there is a difference. There is a difference. My family, for example, wasn't even in this country when slavery was happening. They left Germany. Well, luckily my immediate family didn't have this problem, but many friends my age and everything. I mean, I've sat at Passover dinners with grandparents, you know, of friends who have the tattoo on their arm. So, I mean, there are people who are still alive who experience that. I mean, if somebody who was a slave or was raised by a slave or whose grandfather was a slave meets somebody whose grandfather owned a slave, we might have a different response. But I mean, we're talking about a different time frame, and there are some subtle differences that I think we can't just, you got to compare apples to apples a little bit.
I wouldn't belittle slavery to the Holocaust. I think slavery has a huge impact on generations to come. I don't think you can say one's worse than the other. I really don't.
I didn't say that. I said one was more recent.
Right. Well, I mean, how many generations have passed since slavery stopped?
1860, when did it end?
Yeah, 1865.
Five, I think.
Yep.
So is that yeah, I mean, it's certainly more than
years,
70 whatever
by 20.
years.
Yeah, eight generations.
I'm not saying one is lesser than the other. I'm saying one is more recent. And I mean, again, you know, a lot of people who live in the United States right now weren't even here when that was going on. So their descendants, you know, someone just comes up to me and says, oh, you're white, so you're racist.
No, that's they're just looking for a fight. You know,
happens every day, Jen.
To me?
Every day.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, to me. To me, on Twitter, out in the street in New York City. You know, I mean, what I am personally finding, and this is so distressing because, like I said, before 2019 or 2020, when all this chaos started happening, I had no issue whatsoever. You know, now I'm very apprehensive because I feel like anything I say or do, I'm going to be accused of being racist.
Right.
Well, hey, Jen, great call, but I'm going to move on. But I'm going to move on. But this is your chance to say goodbye to John on the backstory. And John back.
It's been a pleasure, Jen. I wish you the best.
That's what I wanted to say. Yeah, thank you.
Feel better.
Been great on the show, and I just wanted to wish you a lot of luck.
Thank you so much. Yes, feel better.
Jen from Jersey. There we go.
Nice.
She used to be Jen from Connecticut, but now she's Jen from Jersey. I'm just saying. things change. But, Jason, so let's play this clip from a congresswoman. Wait, who's this against woman? Remind me.
Is it Deloro?
Yes, I'd never heard of her. I don't know anything about her.
I
Do you know about her, John?
Say that again, Saul. Yeah, Rosa Deloro. Let me Google her. I don't know anything about her.
Yeah, I don't know anything about her either, but she is a big scaredy cat. Let's hear her.
Oh, I've seen her face.
We heard the shots from the speaker's lobby. And I remember I was laying on the floor and I had just a very little bit of juice left in my cell phone. And I wanted to call my husband. I wanted to call Stan. I was afraid to say, I love you, because it harkened back to September 11th and those last calls. So I just said, I'm all right. Tell the kids I'm all right. They are going to get us out of here.
Oh, jeez.
Allow me to be cynical and say, hey, lady, the cop wasn't going to shoot you. You were not a Trump supporter. Those shots that you heard in the hall, that was a Trump supporter being shot and killed by a guard. Right, John?
Yeah.
That's the only. If she heard any shots, that was only Trump supporters being murdered, right? That's what she heard.
I would, if I were one of the 9/11 families, I would be offended and disgusted by what she said.
Thank you for saying that, John. Thank you for saying that. What was going on today disrespected every single person who died on 9/11, who died in Pearl Harbor. You know, that is such, what that Congresswoman just said is such hyperbolic ridiculousness. It's like, oh my God, we've got people storming the gate to take Instagram selfies. What are we going to do?
With the quivering voice, I called my husband. I wanted to say I love him, but it harkened back to 9/11. No, it didn't harken back to 9/11.
And by the way, you know what? If it did, all the more reason to say I love you.
Yeah.
In other words, I'm going to argue that she is lying, even in her emotional hyperness, that she, in fact, was not, the story she's telling doesn't add up to me. Just knowing human psychology, think about it. She's saying she didn't say I love you to her husband because what? Like she would jinx it? Like if she said I love you?
What, she was afraid they would hear her voice and fly a plane into her? I mean, what's that supposed to mean? What are we supposed to take from that?
I believe she didn't say I love you. I believe that.
Right.
But I don't believe the reason. It doesn't make any freaking sense to me. Am I wrong, Jason? No. I usually am. Go ahead.
You're absolutely right. I mean, you know what? I had a fairly close personal friend, a guy that I had known since grade school, and after college we were becoming close again, and he worked for Cantor Fitzgerald, and he died in that building.
Wow.
And I've thought often what it must have been like, because, you see, when you're in the Capitol, you've been in there, both you guys have been in there, there's a million ways to get around, and I'm sure if you are a congressperson, there's doors that regular people don't have access to. When you're on the 92nd floor, and the 87th floor just exploded and caught fire, you are not getting out of that building, and you had minutes, and some people even hours, to contemplate, you're definitely going to die.
Yes.
Hey,
this is so overblown, it's making me mad.
Okay, well, Jason, we're out of time because the music's playing. The time just flew by. Great appearance, Jason Goodman. Thanks to Jen for calling in. Thanks to Tarif. Thanks to Mark. Thanks to everyone who called in. John, we will see you tomorrow for the ultimate
Yes, sir. One
final
more day.
episode with John Kiriakou of The Backstory.